I froze when I saw the cement pour into my creek. The truck's engine roared gray sludge spilling into the water that once ran through my backyard, my land, my peace. And there she was, Lydia Cross, clipboard in hand, sunglasses glinting in the sun, yelling, "This creek belongs to the HOA." That's when I realized the concrete wasn't just filling my creek. It was burying my rights. It started on what should have been a quiet Tuesday. The rumble of machinery shook me awake at 7 a.m., long before my first cup of coffee. I stumbled to the window in my slippers and saw men setting up heavy equipment near the water. Diesel fumes and dust drifted through the morning air. For 3 years that little creek had been my escape, my place to breathe. And now strangers were staking flags and hammering stakes like it was theirs. I walked out barefoot, dew soaking through the grass, trying to figure out what was going on. A woman in her 40s turned toward me with that kind of smile that says, "Don't bother arguing, I've already won." She introduced herself as Lydia Cross, chair of the HOA Landscape Committee. She said, calm and professional, that they were conducting urgent drainage maintenance under community authority. I blinked at her. "Ma'am, this is my backyard." She flipped a paper, tapped it with a manicured nail. Community Maintenance Easement Section 7.3, Flood Control, Urgent. I looked where she pointed. 15 feet inside my property line. My deed said otherwise. I asked if she had written permission from me or a permit from the county. She gave a practiced sigh and said, "The HOA doesn't need individual approval for emergency work. You agreed to the CC&Rs when you moved here. Remember." And with that, she turned her back and waved at the workers to start the pour. The sound of concrete spilling into the creek was deafening. I pulled out my phone, recording everything: the trucks, the survey flags, Lydia's signature on a work order she refused to show me. By noon, the natural stream that had flowed behind my house for decades was replaced with a slab of gray, redirecting the water in a way that made no sense. When the trucks left, she stuck a metal sign into the mud that read, "Community Drainage Maintenance HOA Authority." Then she smiled and thanked me for my cooperation. That night I couldn't sleep. The smell of wet cement lingered through my window, mixing with the sound of silence where running water used to be. I felt furious, but also small, like I was missing something. Could the HOA really do this? Did I misunderstand my own property line? I needed proof. The next morning, I drove to the county records office and pulled the original plat map. The clerk helped me lay it out on a long table. My finger traced the boundaries I'd memorized when I bought the house. Every inch confirmed what I already knew. The creek was mine. Entirely. No easement. No shared drainage. Lydia had lied. I scanned every page, took photos, and drove straight to my neighbor Rebecca's house. She's an accountant, the kind of woman who keeps files for files. When I told her what happened, her jaw clenched. She started pulling up HOA financial records she'd been keeping out of curiosity. What she found made my stomach drop. No board vote, no emergency motion, no record of approval. Lydia had authorized everything herself, and the contractor who poured the cement, the same one who'd just installed community irrigation upgrades that week. That's when it clicked. The concrete wasn't about drainage, it was about water. Still, part of me wanted to let it go. HOA politics weren't new around here. I thought, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm the difficult one. I sat in my yard that night, staring at the still water, wondering if it was worth fighting over. But then I heard it, a low, rhythmic hum coming from downstream. Mechanical, steady, like a pump. I grabbed a flashlight and followed the sound along the creek, through the trees, to the property line where the HOA's common area began. That's where I found it, a hidden intake system, half buried behind shrubs and decorative rocks. Pipes running straight into my creek pumps, pulling water into a massive underground tank. The whole thing fed directly into the HOA's irrigation system. My creek, my water was keeping their lawns green. The next morning, I recorded everything. Serial numbers, contractor names, the chlorine smell in the air that told me chemicals were mixing back into my property. This wasn't maintenance. It was theft. Rebecca and I gathered every invoice, every email we could find. The timeline showed weeks of planning, secret approvals, and payments signed by Lydia alone. We filed a formal complaint with the County Environmental Office. Within days, a county engineer named Samuel Martinez came to investigate. He spent hours surveying the site, measuring boundaries, taking photos. Then Lydia showed up, flanked by 2 HOA board members. She tried to talk over him, claiming it was an urgent project to protect the neighborhood from flooding. Samuel didn't even look up from his clipboard. "Ma'am," he said, "the HOA has zero jurisdiction over private land. Any work here without the owner's consent is illegal." I could have hugged the man. He examined the concrete diversion and confirmed what I already suspected: the new flow sent water directly toward the hidden intake, not away from it. It wasn't flood prevention, it was redirection, purpose-built for water extraction. He filed 3 violations on the spot: illegal construction, unpermitted water diversion, and environmental contamination. Lydia's face went pale, but she didn't back down. A week later, I got a certified letter from the HOA demanding a $12,000 for property restoration and legal fees. They were blaming me for obstructing community safety improvements. I called Rebecca and she laughed, not the amused kind, but the "they really think they can get away with this" kind. She pulled the HOA's insurance policy and pointed to a clause in bold print: no coverage for any work performed on private land without written consent. The association was on the hook for every dollar Lydia had spent. We called for an emergency board meeting. The residents packed the community hall, everyone buzzing with rumors. When Rebecca presented the records, Lydia's solo approvals, the missing votes, the unlicensed contractor, the room went dead quiet. People realized their HOA fees had funded an illegal project that could bankrupt the entire neighborhood. But Lydia refused to admit fault. She accused me of sabotaging community progress. I stood up and said, "You poured cement in my creek without permission, redirected my water, and poisoned my land. That's not progress, that's theft." The board voted to send the dispute to formal arbitration. The following Tuesday, we sat in the community center conference room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The arbitrator, David Rodriguez, laid out the law in plain English. Homeowners associations cannot touch private property without consent. Not for drainage, not for beautification, not for anything. I handed him my binders, deed surveys, videos, violation notices, the entire paper trail. Rebecca added her spreadsheets showing unapproved spending and emails between Lydia and the contractor. In one message, Lydia literally wrote, "We'll finish before anyone asks questions." When the arbitrator read that line aloud, the room shifted. Lydia's lawyer rubbed his temples. David looked up and said, "This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate." Samuel testified next, explaining how the concrete diversion had funneled my creek water into the illegal intake system. "This was engineered," he said, "not accidental." Lydia tried to defend herself, said it was for the good of the community. David interrupted her. "Good intentions don't override private property law, ma'am." The ruling was swift. The HOA was liable for all restoration fines and legal fees. Lydia was personally responsible for any damages exceeding insurance coverage. Her personal exposure over $20,000. But the real justice came later. County crews arrived to tear out the cement jackhammers, echoing through the neighborhood. Neighbors gathered to watch. As the last slab broke apart, the creek began to flow again, clear and alive. Within minutes, the HOA's irrigation pumps started sputtering. One by one, they shut off dry. The entire system depended on stolen water from my land. By the end of the day, sprinklers across the neighborhood went silent. Lawns began to yellow. People started asking questions. When they found out Lydia's project had caused it all and cost the community tens of thousands in fines, the outrage spread like wildfire. At the next HOA meeting, the vote was nearly unanimous, 37-3. Lydia was stripped of her position, banned from all committees, and ordered to repay her share of the damages. Within months, she filed for bankruptcy. When the dust settled, I installed a small bronze plaque by the creek. It reads, "When power crosses boundaries, nature pushes back." And now the water runs free again, clear and calm, the same way it always should have. And I learned something the hard way: silence only rewards the people who think rules don't apply to them.